Good morning. Good morning. Let's have a quick review. There's a priest on one side and a pimp on the other, and that represents the classic battle of good and evil. Where you're on the side of the priest, you try to be normal and well adjusted. You say what you mean and mean what you say as best as you can. You become a kind of professional citizen, and then it turns into being a good wife and a good husband and a good mother and father. And it turns into home economics. And it's home economics that gets everybody out of poverty. That's what has such a huge middle class. On the other side is the pimp. And the pimp knows how to manipulate and intimidate, hustle and con. He attacks the weak, he runs from the strong, and he does all the producing and everybody else does all the consuming. It turns into that's the history of most of the history of human beings on this earth, including communism and fascism. And that turns into a monopoly supply and demand curve. Communism is a prima donna example of that. Slavery is another example where there's everybody living in the huge mansion, and everybody else is the people who do the producing or in the slave quarters or in the communist housing projects or tenement houses. It depends. It just depends on their words that mean the same thing. And so the idea they've done that. They did that. Our society flip-flopped in the 1970s. The communists in the 1950s said they were going to overthrow the United States in the 1970s using economics, and they did it. And now that adjustment's been made, and now there's a huge class of poverty. Story after story. What am I going to do? I'm a gal. I'm supposed to spend $900 a month putting my child in a daycare center so I can work and come up with money for that daycare center and rent and food and everything else. I just can't do it. And the answer is, you can't do it. It's impossible. They did it anyway. Believe it or not, you're living in the communist ideal society. We're supposed to be all the same person, man and woman. You're supposed to like dropping your kid off in a daycare center and going working in the factory with a hammer and sickle in your hand. If you take a look, the people who are the class of intelligentsia, the class that run the Communist Party, don't do anything like that at all. They do just the opposite. And Women's Lib is a terrific example of that. You notice that they didn't do any of the producing. They did all of the consuming. They crawled out. All you have to do is lose this kitchen sink, they would say. And all they did was throw out God. They separated the act of sex from the act of getting the gal pregnant. They had a sexual revolution. Another word for that is called malice. And they made money by causing people to have to work more hours. They threw out those very fundamental arguments in philosophy. They have the truth of the truth, the decent of the decent. In other words, a gal who changes the dirty diapers gets the sex, and a priest who takes a vow of poverty maximizes profits. And those two arguments go together, and they come into, and the Pope, the priest, holds that is a dot on the lowercase letter I that causes it all to come into being to begin with. So that's the God in God and country. That's what made the United States such a magical place to live. We had this huge middle class. You could go out and get a job as a mechanic or a repairman, and you made enough money to support a wife and children on a 3-bedroom brick house and a half-acre lot. And that's what made the United States such a magical place. That kids were cheap in the sense that it didn't cost much money to put shoes on a kid, and everything centered around the ideal man and the ideal woman. Then in came glory, the feminist Harry the hippie, and now the Afro and Donna the Dyke. And they had a revolution in our society. And that's one of the very important things you have to stop and talk about. What did they do? They threw out God. They separated the act of sex. They institutionalized malice. And they made it perfectly okay to make money by causing other people to have to work more hours. They caused poverty. And what else did they do? It worked. They institutionalized pulling a bum's rush. It was one of my big mistakes in life. I always said I could never stand up to it. I'm not the only one, but I always assumed, like most people, that people who hustle were inherently the bad guys, and that's a mistake. And that was a mistake since the early 1970s when courts came out and said, we decided there would be no God in the government anymore. That's actually a bum's rush, just so it said. There actually is a religion. It's a satanic religion. The classical definition of satanic is the complete absence of God. It's the complete absence of the holy, the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist, the Pope and the priest, that attitude, that disposition that the Catholic priest has. And take that out and come over here, and you can call them a class of intelligentsia, or you can call them a class of psychopaths or sociopaths. They're words that have very similar meanings. And they do the things that they do, and it works. We're simply hardwired that way. A human being is hardwired not to stand up to a bum's rush. To go the other way, to be this normal, well-adjusted person is not it's not a natural thing at all. It's a very much unnatural thing. And so I'm hoping to do what like everyone else, decades ago, I tried to do something like that. Didn't work, but there's always hope. And so the idea is to get you to call in. If you're the gal, you call in and say, look, this is enough. I've got a couple of kids. This is how much of a budget I need. If I was to take the role of a 1950s American housewife, that's a professional gal. Excuse me. That's a professional gal. And they're running the household as a business, the production end of things. And just to sneak it in very quickly, if you're the gal that's going to do the producing, you're the gal that's going to do the consuming. And so you would be a professional mom, but an amateur tennis player, and all this, these professional athletes, professional tennis players wouldn't exist. And it would be you playing in those tennis tournaments they have every September. Tennis was a big thing with the women's liberation movement. And you go back and look and you realize how many of them were taking male steroids and using the cigarettes as a sponsor, and completely trashing. It was the open era of tennis. It wasn't the open era of tennis. They pushed out all the gals that practiced virtues. And to get to point out whether they were the gal or the guy, or maybe it was by race, or it was all the same thing. They discriminated not for or against women, but in favor of women who were malicious and against women who practiced virtues. Pushed the nun right out. And we're paying a horrible price for this. Kids don't know how to read or write. There are a bunch of children right out of the movie Lord of the Flies. Everybody's living in poverty. And there's even a philosophical class that said, do this intentionally so that our society will crash. We'll starve by the millions, and then communists can come in and take over. All of that seems true, and it's all working. But you can do something. At least you can do something. Hold on. You can do something right now. Enough is enough. We have our little trick, without sounding too earthy. The shop manual definition of mental illness is a normal taken into the abnormal. Both the Catholic and the atheist say that, from a cold to the flu to pneumonia. The Catholics say, hold on, go backwards. When you get back to a cold, from pneumonia to a cold, the normal is normal, but not good enough. And sex is just the easiest way to see it. Sit in a chair, fantasize about the gals until you become sexually aroused if you're a young man. And then open your eyes, do it again. And then only fantasize about actually getting the gal pregnant. And there you go. These very powerful thoughts, to associate them with actually getting the gal pregnant, it's not a natural thing at all. It doesn't even occur to the guy. You have to be taught that. And now I understand what original sin is with a snap of a finger. And they threw all that out. So you're going to have to go back to that. If you're going to go back to that, there's certain rules, Bob. You get to be first in line at the courthouse to plead guilty to the paternity suit. You get to own the house. You don't rent property to people. You don't rent property from people. You don't live in communist housing projects, and you're not in the class of intelligentsia that controls them. You own your own house, Bob. And you live in the gal's house, and So the question for the guy is, if the gal can call in and say, how much money do I need to be a 1950s home economist? I got to, how much are shoes? How much money do I need to get everybody out of poverty and into plenty? And if you're a guy, then you start asking, how many hours do I have to work? If you work as a guy, has a job, a plumber has a job, in Tucson, the garbage collectors, it's a story, but for a while there, they were very famous. People would come from New York City and Tokyo, Japan in my day to follow the garbage guys around to figure out how come Tucson was so clean. And that would be a job. So you would graduate from high school, you would take mechanics, you would get a job in the garbage guys, you would drive these big rigs down alleys nobody would drive a car down. And then you would own the house. That's the production side of things. And you would be the one playing in that tennis tournament in September or whatever it is. You would be the guys that get together here in Tucson, form a baseball team, and take on those vicious scoundrels in New York City. And that's how it's supposed to work. The ideal society. And it has rules to it. And everybody knows those rules, and they threw them out. So if you ever want to, I think this is one time that we can add 2 cents to the gang in the playground. You're just going to have to be someone that says enough of this is enough. This is what I need. I'm a gal. Start straightening up your back. Walk with good posture. I can do this on this kind of budget. Perhaps you're living in someplace like St. Louis, or this is coming to you from Tucson, Arizona, and it's about a little after 4. I tried to put it here so that people in Australia could listen because of the things you see on the computer in Australia. And if you're a gal in Australia, that's enough of all of that. You have a house. You have a 3-bedroom brick house and a half-acre lot. How big of a budget do you need? Home economics, by the way, goes something like this, to repeat it. There's a married couple. A married couple is the smallest economic thing. Go up to the computer and take out a transistor, take out a second transistor, and as you take out the third transistor, it's no longer a computer. It's a pile of electronic parts. You put that transistor back in, it's back to being a computer, and that's the family unit. 10-year-olds can't pay for their moms. Moms can't take care of the 10-year-old and go out and work in the furniture factory. Dad can't go out and work in the furniture factory and run the household. And so the mom and dad are viewed as a same thing. When you get married, you become one. And so you look around and say, okay, there's poverty. And then you ask yourself, what is not poverty? And not poverty in a shop manual fashion is the detached house. There's a living room to live in. How big of the living room do you need to get everybody comfortably out of poverty? Excuse me. And a dining room to eat in, and a kitchen to support the dining room, and a utility room, and a family car to support the household unit. And that's what gets everybody out of poverty. And that was working well. We were the envy of the world, a shining city on a hill for the world to see. And in the United States, I'm sure other places too. That's God and country, by the way. Just so it said, picture a 1950s American house right there. Now go off to the side. At the bottom, there's farming and mining. One notch up, there's manufacturing. One notch up, there's wholesale, retail, and repair. One notch up, there's retirement, education, and recreation. Doctors and lawyers form a kind of lattice that holds all this together, and it's the Catholic priest that causes this to come into being to begin with. It's a God and country thing. It comes out of popes and monks and monasteries. That's where you get the God and country. And so you're just going to have to straighten yourself up emotionally. You know the drill. You straighten yourself up emotionally, you will the good of another person, and then you try and adopt that attitude that the priest and nun have. They a common housewife is sort of inside the personality of the Catholic nun. She's a mother to society. And the normal average Joe is the kind of personality within or from the Catholic priest. There's a kind of hierarchy there. And so get into character, come on, get into the character of being normal and well-adjusted. Maybe there's an actor out there. They're really good at getting in the characters. Get into the character, be normal and well-adjusted, and say, enough of this is enough. I can't do this anymore. So start calling in, how much of a budget do I need? This is how much money I need to get things going. And this is to run the household. And so fork it over. I'll see you when I get back from the stores. To think of something rather endearing, they went so far out of their way to belittle the common housewife, but she's the one that did the overwhelming majority of consuming. People actually went to war to get women, teenagers, and old people out of the workplace, that definition of the workplace, and the women's liberation movement, and Harry the hippie and Al the Afro. They fought like mad to put gals and teenagers and old people back into the workplace. It's just sick. They themselves were never in the workplace. They were the consumption society. It was discrimination and viewed as horrible if you didn't let them cash in on everything and move into the foothills and become professional consumers. If you look at go on the computer and look at the feminist movement of the 70s, and you realize all these gals were not very well adjusted and not very nice. That's about as polite as it gets. And they won. That's two things. You just admit it. Well, I'm going to, I kind of made a mistake. I put the wrong times down. So I was trying to come on Saturdays at 7 o'clock New York, 6 o'clock New York time, 4 o'clock in here in Tucson, 3 o'clock in LA. And tomorrow morning at noon New York time, and about 5, I guess that's about 5 in England, Great Britain. And so there's trying to get people from different places to call in and start putting numbers on this. If you'll hear this or you pass the word and say, okay, this is enough. This is what I need. We'll go back to home economics. We shall be a Yank. I shall be a Yank. I shall be normal and well-adjusted, even though that's not a natural thing. I shall will the good of another person. I make money by making somebody else better off. I have the leadership style of washing the feet of the apostles, which turns into the idea of putting you in your own business, making you more money, putting you in your own house, subsidiary, you can't push away. And then that turns into home economics. And that's what we need to go back to. We just to sneak something in. This certainly is very much a MAGA thing, a Make America Great Again thing. But you have to be careful if you're in that camp. You're going to go from the Democrats back to the Republicans. It's not going to work. Ronald Reagan did that. And it's just not going to work in the long run. So, and that certainly isn't an anti-Trump. Donald Trump ran standing up to a bum's rush. That makes him an absolute hero. He didn't have any help. You're supposed to not be able to do that. In order to stand up to a bum's rush, you have to have a third person do it for you. Even the Green Beret can't beat up somebody who can beat him up. And so he broke that. Great. Now be careful. Without sounding insulting, you don't go from these left-wing, very woke characters, as they say, that are feminists, and then go over to the female judge and the female Marine or the female fighter pilot. They're the same group, just different radio stations. If you notice, the gals that we're so desperate for, Melania Trump, and the nuns you see on EWTN, if you can look them up, and the Home Economist, the gal in England that was noted for teaching children so well, Kath Kathleen, I forgot her. She has a hard to pronounce name. She's the literal opposite of the gal that just took over the Church of England. That gal, the teacher, she's so desperately needed. And you're the gal that says enough is enough. I have to straighten up and start straightening things out. I have to go back to home economics. And they're still out of the picture. So if you're a MAGA guy, you got to do something about that. You can. It's walking into the fog is that's all you do. You try 3 things at the end of the week. You keep the 2 that work, keep the one that works throughout the other 2. Do it again, and so there's no disgrace in that. So I'll see you tomorrow at 9 o'clock New York time, 12 o'clock LA New York time, and I hope you'll pass the word. I hope some gal here that start calling in. This is what I need. This is how much money I need. This is my family budget. And if you're a guy, well, my goodness, this is how many hours I'd have to work in order to come up with that budget. Okay, see you.